Good evening, everyone. My name is Gerald Fitzgerald. I'm the board chair of the Cabbagetown Art and Craft Organization, and I want to welcome everyone to our Artist Orientation Workshop. Thank you for joining us this evening. Many of you may have come to the show in previous years, but may not know very much about us. Cabbagetown Art and Craft, now in its 35th year, is a not-for-profit community organization whose commitment is to support art and craft creators, to encourage appreciation of the visual arts, and to give artists an affordable and accessible place to showcase and sell their work. The show generates funding that allows us to give back to our community and helps support community arts programs, including the Cabbagetown Arts Centre and the Toronto Kiwanis Boys and Girls Club arts programs. It's also important to point out that all the work for the Cabbagetown show, both pre-show and during the show, is done by volunteers. There are no paid staff, so please be gentle with the volunteers. We're there to help, but sometimes we may be spread a little thin. Now, to start this evening's program, I'm pleased to introduce our presenters. We are lucky enough to have three very experienced artists to take us through the orientation. Let me introduce our show manager, Angela Lane, along with Kate Taylor and Lisa Hickey, who will tell you everything you need to know to be successful at the Cabbagetown show, or any show for that matter. I'll now turn the program over to Angela.
So part one, just really staying connected. So Cabbagetown, just some due dates. So at the end of the month, at the end of August, that is, it's not August yet, but AER event rental orders are due then. So, and that is a third party. So just their emails there, all the contact information is on the rental form. And then we have optional load grid and tents on the 5th, and then obviously the show, the 6th, 7th, 8th. To stay informed, we will be communicating with you through Submittable. That was the submission platform email that we used. The email that we're really using and you'll be getting information from us from is info@cabbagetownartandcraft.org. So if you're looking for something in your email, you can't find something, you can just search for that, but you can also log into your Submittables platform and you should be able to see all of our correspondence there. The artist information handbook is published and it was emailed to you. It's on our website and all the information can be found in there as well. And if you could follow our YouTube channel, this presentation is being recorded. So if you want to go back and look at something, you are welcome to do that. We'll be publishing that on our YouTube channel. So the website, on the website, at the top navigation bar is our exhibitor page. So the exhibitor information is there. And you'll see here the download the exhibitor handbook if you haven't done that yet. It's on the website, as well as the poster and the postcard, and we'll continue to upload other content on the site there. So it's under this area, exhibitor information on the website. All right, just very briefly, some of your exhibitor obligations is really to be there regardless of the weather, right? It's a 3-day show, so you're expected to be on site for those 3 days regardless of weather. The tent displays must be self-supporting. Just wanted to point that out as well, and that the exhibitors assume all responsibility and liability, so we recommend insurance. Booths must be weighed down at all times. You cannot be staking into the park grounds. And exhibitors who pack up early may be prohibited from participating in future shows. So we ask you to please not do that. We also hope that you'll actively promote the show and clean up after yourself. Just few little things there to remember. The criteria, this is all in the original information when you did your submission, and it's in the handbook as well, so you can take a look at that. But really, we have a zero tolerance policy for inappropriate behavior, including violence or verbal abuse. So please be nice. So that's there. So the site map, I think some of you are familiar with this. I don't know if anybody has questions about the site map. I know that it was on the website and you were asked to ask for specific locations and areas and roadway or pathways that you wanted. Booth numbers are coming out soon, so we're working on that. They should be out in another week or so. I think Michelle's working on that. She'll have it out in a bit. But for those who don't know, yep. Was there a question? No? Okay, so this is basically the site map. It's the Riverdale Park West. So if for those who aren't that familiar with it, I recommend you take a trip down there to check out this beautiful park. But it's Gerard, it's really close to Gerard and Parliament, but it's a little bit northeast of there. Is this really nice park. So it's Carlton, Sumac, and Winchester is sort of the boundary streets. Travel. So Cabbagetown Festival is the same weekend. So I just want to flag, please prepare for road closures because they close down quite a few roads. There's barricades. And so make sure you give yourself enough time to get there in the mornings on Saturday and Sunday, the Cabbagetown Festival runs. So just be prepared for that and plan your route. Toronto does post all the road closures, but I would just say, assume that there's a whole area around where the Cabbagetown Festival is. You can go on their website. They have a whole map of where their stuff is, but you can also go on the Toronto Road Closures website and it lists stuff as well. But just be prepared to take extra time Saturday morning versus your Friday morning, Saturday, Sunday morning. So just welcome. The welcome booth is the place where you'll come for assistance and clarification throughout the show. It's where you're going to check in. It's where we'll have exhibitor refreshments on Saturday and Sunday. It's basically the show info for all visitors, first aid. We have a draw. We'll talk about that shortly. Lost and found. And this is where our volunteers will be checking in. If you have questions leading up to the show, the best thing is the email, the info@Cabbagetown. If you have challenges and you can't leave your booth and you need to get a hold of us, there's a phone number here and we'll publish that. And you can call us or text us during the show. And that phone stays in the info booth.
I just jump in there for 1 sec, Angela.
Yeah.
The day that you really need the coffee and snacks more than any other, I think, is Friday. What's that?
Oh, okay.
So we'll have snacks and coffee there for everybody all 3 days.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't think we were doing it Friday, but that's great. Yay. Okay. So we do have volunteers. Our volunteers are identified. They either have a green Cabbagetown t-shirt or a sash. They're going to be helping with the load in, marshaling and directing traffic a little bit and helping as parking attendants in our exhibitor parking area. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But just so you know, those are all volunteers. Please be patient with them and please listen to them if they should be identified. They will also be event greeters throughout the show. They're going to provide direction and greet visitors, and they're going to encourage participation in our gift card draw. And we really want to try to promote that at the show. So we're asking you to help promote that as well. We want to build up our patron email list. So that's a real goal for us at this show. So help us do that, please. And then obviously, and then we're gonna we want to support you and make your show awesome. So we're gonna have volunteers also available to support you during the exhibition by letting you take a break in your booth. So provide some artist relief. They're going to help you get registered as well. But basically, it's a first come, first serve as available, depending on what volunteers we have. So we might get busy around that lunch hour or whatever. So please just plan accordingly. You're going to check in at the info booth on Saturday, anytime from 8:30 to 12:30. The show starts at 1 or so. Oh, I put Saturday. I meant Friday. Oh my goodness. Typo. But Friday, oh no, sorry, that is Saturday. You're going to check in Saturday morning before the show starts. Oh no, that's Friday. I'm sorry. I've got the wrong dates here. I've got everything wrong. I apologize. Okay. We're checking in Friday before the show starts at 1 o'clock. So you're setting up between 8:30 and 12:30 a.m. And then you will be checking in and you'll be getting your booth sign with a zip tie to attach that sign to the front of your booth. You'll get this participation button. These are the ones from last year, and a parking pass if you've purchased a parking pass. So load in. So we are offering an optional load in on the Thursday. That's late afternoon, early evening. I'll send out time specific to that, but it's really meant for tents and grids only. We ask you to not bring a lot of your artwork and not leave that stuff in the booths, but really it's just optional load in for those people who need a little extra time or they have to do 2 vehicle runs. So it just hopefully is a bit helpful. We're going to ask you to sign up for that just so that we know who's coming into the park and how many people we have coming into the park. But if you email me, then I'll just add you to the list. So Saturday and Sunday, load-in is curbside along Carlton here, Sumac and Winchester. And Carlton has a bit of like a parking spots, but they're often quite busy, but you'll be able to pull in curbside and be able to load in there. And we're asking you to please be patient. We have 165 exhibitors, so everybody's going to be trying to get in. Sorry, go ahead. Oh, I thought there was a question. We have a lot of exhibitors and it's probably the most stressful time of the show is load in on Saturday. And so we just ask you to please be patient. There's minimal staff on site and volunteers on site. So hopefully they'll be directing traffic. If you have any questions, just look for somebody in a green t-shirt or a sash. Consider having help to help monitor your items. Depending on how many people we have, we might not be able to be eyes everywhere. And just vehicles shouldn't be left unattended, and no vehicles can be on the property. So you can't drive down with your vehicle on those pathways. So you'll be carting. So just plan to cart your materials or carry your materials back and forth to your booth. Is there any questions on that? No? So setup is pretty, setup is, so you have your booth will be marked with your number on the grass, on the turf, and the numbers will be on the front of the walkway. So it follows the pathway. So you're going to face the pathway. Everybody has a 10 by 10 booth space. And we're just asking you to please be respectful to not extend sideways outside of your booth. So your stuff should be inside your booth, not outside of your booth. You can extend at the back side for extra storage of materials, space behind your booth. Most booths will have space behind them. So you should be able to like store a cart there if you need to store a cart there, or extra materials or bins or a table or whatever you need. Yeah, here's how a little magic can happen. Don't we wish it all happened like that? It was so fast. Oh, you can also see the top here is where we want you to put your booth number on the top left corner of your booth.
Magic at art shows.
All right, so parking. So we do have exhibitor parking, and it's at the Spruce Court Public School. So, yep, question? Oh, so you can register for that parking and pay for that park. It is a paid parking. It's very reasonable because we do have to pay for that space. So we need to offset some of the costs for that. So we do charge a small fee for that, but it's right here. Here's Sprucedale Public School. So you'll just have to drive around because some of these streets are one-way streets and you just pop in here. But the parking is all, I don't know if you can see my arrow. Can you see Carlton and Sumac? It's on the corner there, this big open space here. That's where it is. So basically and there's steps. So you just walk up the steps and you cross and you're right in the park. So it's very, very close. It's your best option for parking. Parking is limited in and around the Cabbagetown area, especially last year they introduced this bike path. So parking is even more limited than it has been in the past. Questions?
Yeah, that's Angela, that area that you were just circling there is that's behind the school, correct?
Yes, so basically it's
it's on the field at the school, I
yes,
believe.
correct. Yeah,
Okay.
it's basically on the field there. That's where we
Yeah.
park. So you'll
Yeah.
drive around, you'll drive in and around here and you'll come into the school and
That's right.
somebody will direct you into where to park here.
Yeah.
You'll be parking in this area here.
That's the
Okay.
easiest way.
Yeah, that's the best way, just to and your vehicle's close on hand if you need to go get something from there. It's not very far at all because we're all in this park here, right?
Yep.
So it's actually closer than trying to park on the street or here or whatever if your booth is here. Okay. All right.
Angela, can
Yeah.
I ask a quick question? Is there
Yeah.
in-out privileges for the parking?
Yeah. Yeah. You will get a sign and you will put that booth, that parking pass on your dash of your vehicle. So, but you can't share that, like it's per vehicle. So you need to, so you won't be able to use it for one vehicle and then go out and bring another vehicle in. So we just have to have that on your dash. We'll be printing those out and you'll be picking those up at the check-in when you check in on Saturday morning at the info booth. So load out. Yeah.
Question,
Another
Angela. So if we park at the school, oh
Yeah.
no, but we don't park at the school on the Friday, right? I was gonna
No.
say, is it quick enough to even if we park and then bring our art material to our booth from the parking spot, is that too far away? But Friday
you-
we're not.
You can do that, but the challenge is there's steps, like it's a little bit, it's lower than street level. So I would say it would be how much you, depending on how much you have, it would be difficult to jump up those steps. And Friday, it's not available, right?
Friday's not available.
Yeah.
And just to jump in there too, Angela, you mentioned Saturday morning. It's Friday morning for the registration, right? Not Saturday.
Yeah, sorry,
And
Friday
for the
morning.
and to get your parking
I keep
pass.
saying Saturday. I'm so used to doing 2-day shows.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep saying Saturday, but yes, Friday morning is check-in before the event starts. So that's where you'll get your parking pass.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
How do we purchase the parking pass?
So you'll be able to pay for that online. You'll be able to do that ahead of time by sending an e-transfer. So we'll send you the details, an invite to actually organize and pay for that, right?
Perfect. Thank you.
Angela, Dedry has a question.
Okay,
Yeah, that was me that just asked how we purchase.
Okay.
Thank you
Okay.
though.
awesome. Okay, so loadout happens pretty organically. There's no loadout, please, prior to closing each day. So please don't start packing up your booth before the show is done. It's very disrespectful to your fellow exhibitors. So we ask you to please not do that. And if you could please unload out, pack up your booth stuff in your booth first before you try to bring your vehicle around. The reality is that some people pack up really quickly and some people very slowly. So it's not necessarily you'll have a better spot to pull up if you bring your vehicle early or late. I think that some people just like it normally happens very smoothly if you don't try to block traffic and try to get your vehicle there before you have your materials packed up so that you can load in quickly. The idea is really to kind of load your vehicle as quickly as possible. So have your stuff packed up first. So again, we'll have minimal staff to on hand to watch materials at curbside. So please arrange for help if needed. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought there was another question.
I have another question, Angela. Last year, I remember when I was loading out every day from the show, I was allowed to bring my car up to the top of the park. I can't remember what the street name was.
Probably Winchester.
Yeah, I think so. And then, but I had all my stuff ready to go in the wagon. So
Yeah.
I just brought the wagon there and just everything was fine. Just quickly grabbed the car and just loaded it and I was gone.
Yeah.
So
So that's the
real
best
big
way to
issue.
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't
big
take the
issue.
spot up until you've got your stuff packed. That's the best way
Mhm.
for everybody to get out as smooth as possible.
Mhm.
Any other questions on that?
Yeah, quick one. Is the school parking Saturday and Sunday this year? I missed that part of the.
Yeah, it's 2 days, Saturday and
Oh,
Sunday.
cool. Okay, great. Okay.
So the challenge is the Friday afternoon, right? I usually get dropped off Friday, and I would say, I would encourage your visitors, like even if you're sending out a newsletter, just to mention the parking, encourage people like, oh, it's a great show. Transit's super easy. It's the best show to take transit to because parking is a challenge in that area with the whole Cabbagetown Festival that weekend, especially on the Saturday, Sunday. Security, we do have overnight security, actually Thursday as well. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Sorry about that. Security. So we do have overnight security, but we really ask you to take your materials out of the booth. It's all at your own risk. We strongly recommend that to unload your valuables overnight. The reality is the security guard can't be everywhere at all times. Any loss or damage or theft is at your liability. Washrooms. So there's portable washrooms on all sides of the park. And then there's really great public washrooms in the Riverdale Farm. It's open from 9 to 5. So I would just say, try to get there before 5 o'clock. Sometimes they close the doors a little bit early, like they close for people not to be coming in. But they're very clean and they're managed and they're monitored all day long. There's baby change stalls there and other stuff. People are asking in the park for things like that. There's access there for handicap washrooms as well. Though some of our porta potties will be accessible as well. Food and beverage. So plan ahead, pack every day. But we do have food vendors on site. So there is food there, so you can grab a lunch there if you'd like. But sometimes as a vendor, it's kind of hard to get it very, very quickly. But there is food and beverages there. And we have the HTO water trucks this year. Yay. So bring your reusable water bottle. Music. Yep. Question? Nope.
And I think it's a bit of feedback. There's a few people who are still not muted and it's giving a little bit of feedback. So if everyone can mute.
All right, so we have music again. So it was really, really great last year. We have the same musicians this year. So in the central area of the park, we'll be set up a stage area with a lot of chairs, and we'll be entertaining our visitors. Sponsorships, AER is our event rental sponsor, and Toro Group has been generous enough to do our print materials for us. So that is wonderful. So I'm going to open up for panel discussion, and we're going to talk about our Rocking Your Art show. So Kate Taylor, I think you met her in the beginning. Kate Taylor is the past Artist Network chair. She's a long-term exhibitor. She's been showing her work. Kate, how long? She must be muted.
Sorry about that. I couldn't find my unmute. I figure I've done about 200 shows. So
yeah,
lots.
So a veteran, she can answer lots of our questions. And Lisa as well. Lisa's been showing for done a lot of different outdoor shows. Lisa, how long have you been showing?
I think this is my 16th year.
Wow. Awesome. So though we have two-dimensional artists here, a lot of the same information is pertinent to all exhibitors. But I'm going to ask other exhibitors who maybe we might not know. I'm a two-dimensional artist as well, a painter. So I think if you have other insights throughout this conversation that you'd like to share with others, or questions you might have, other people might be able to answer. So I ask you to please use the chat in a very productive manner so that we can all get other information. I'm not as familiar with some of the elements that perhaps a jeweler might need or a textile artist might need. So if you want to jump stuff into the questions into the chat, by all means, that would be really helpful. All right. So we're just going to talk a little bit about marketing. This is the gallery, the Cabbagetown Art and Craft gallery on the website. So everybody has a presence there. So take a look at yours. If there's any challenges, I took the screenshot from the 2023, but if you're able to, I don't actually think it's up right now. I'll send an email confirming when the 2024 show is showing. I know that it was in the works last week, so I don't know if it's finished, but if you can just take a look at your profile, if there's anything wrong or anything like that, please let us know. We have been distributing postcards. You would have seen them at the Toronto Outdoor Art Festival this past couple weekends ago if you were at that show. They're available for pickup. So I strongly encourage you to pick up postcards and distribute them at any other shows that you have this year. I think that there's quite a few. We have a lot of postcards printed, so please do that. The locations were in an email that was sent out. If you need that, just reach out to me. But they're North Toronto, West Toronto, and downtown Toronto. You should be able to get postcards. Please. So we are also going to be printing additional postcards, new postcards. We're sharing a postcard with Cabbagetown Festival, and we're going to be printing 22,000, and we're going to be distributing those to local and great neighborhoods, hopefully encouraging people to come out and check out the show. Posters will be available. They're not printed yet. So as soon as they are, I think somebody reached out to me right before this meeting asking for posters. They're not quite ready, but when they will, you'll get an email notification. And if you have a use for them and you can use them and post them somewhere in your local neighborhood, a retail location that you frequent, if they're willing to put that up on the window or on a board, please do pick up posters. Graphics, social graphics, customizable graphics, they're coming soon. An exciting thing that we have this year, again, I talked about it briefly, is that we are going to have a draw to win gift cards for visitors at the park. And what we're going to do is that our goal is to actually promote pre-event, but also to help draw traffic, but also mostly build an ongoing patron communication list. So we're going to ask you to, we'll do some graphics around that as well. And we'll ask you to please promote that so that we then get people's emails and be able to invite them in following years. So we're going to have a couple of gift cards available for people. And so I also want to flag that so that later on during the show or after the show, if someone says they've won a gift certificate, what's going to happen is so the gift certificate they have to purchase something from an exhibiting artist. And what we're going to do is Cabbagetown will pay that fee, and then the winner will pay the remaining amount of money. So we'll send that through e-transfer to the lucky artists. So newsletters are important. Kate or Lisa, do you want to pop in here and maybe talk a little bit about newsletters?
Well,
Yeah.
I think that, I think both of us would kind of agree that, obviously your newsletter that you currently have is one of the best ways to drive traffic because people are already following you, they're already committed, they're already interested in your work. Sending out a newsletter to invite them to Cabbagetown is certainly going to help you. And if everybody does that, it's the classic, rising tide floats all boats, all artists will benefit. And just one of the other things I was going to say quickly is that it's also really important. I think this is a great opportunity at these shows to build your newsletter list and have a conscious strategy in order to do that. So we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, I agree with Kate. I'm not the best at sending out newsletters, so I only end up sending out a couple a year, but I find that my mailing list is always so appreciative. People often write back to my newsletter and say they're so happy to hear from me and they love that I'm going to be showing locally. So I know a lot of us think it's a bother or we're bothering folks, but I don't think we are. I think people want to come out to see you, especially post-COVID. And it's a good reminder to get out and that you're going to be local.
Yeah, I often ask because a lot of people will, I get my notes back from MailChimp that always say, oh, it's too long and all this kind of stuff. And I ask people, and I'm always amazed how many people actually read the whole thing and they like the personal contacts within your newsletter. So I always try and approach it like I'm writing a letter to a friend. This is what I'm doing. These are the fun things that are happening. This is my inspiration for my art. And it's a pretty powerful way of kind of connecting those authentic relationships with people that are following you.
Yeah, totally. And an invite to meet in real life instead of on the computer, because so many of these connections are on social media now that I find these shows are almost like Instagram meetups. People come to your booth, they say, I follow you on Instagram. So to send that personal invite to meet in real life is a really valuable. So yeah, don't be afraid to send a newsletter. You're not bothering people. It's a good reminder.
And that sort of leads into social media. Do either of you guys want to chat a little bit about that and the importance of that leading up to the show and during the show?
Well, yeah, I mean, I said I was pretty bad at doing newsletters. I only send a couple a year, but I am pretty good at doing at least an Instagram post a couple times a week. And as I mentioned, a lot of folks say, I follow you on Instagram. I'm so happy to meet you. So it's really, really important to just make a post. Even a post every day isn't a bad idea in the week or two leading up, or a story in Instagram. Link your Instagram to your Facebook, because a lot of my demographic, my purchasing demographic, use Facebook. So yeah, just make sure you're reminding folks when the show is, put a link to Cabbagetown so they can find all the information. And yeah, use your socials. Your socials are so valuable.
Yeah, and I
Yes.
think that's a good
Go ahead.
point. Like I find too, I try and post at least once a day. I try and post kind of at the same time. People then kind of expect to see it at that point in time. And I'm always amazed by the things that people are really interested in. So I think that make sure your face is in these posts. People like to see the artists that are behind the work, be a jeweler or a sculptor or a painter or whatever. And the other thing I'm finding is always amazes me is that they want to see, this is what my living room looks like before I pack the work in the car. And this is how I'm figuring out what my display for my jewelry is going to be. And this is what my car looks like as it's packed. Those kind of behind the scenes are things that most people don't get access to. And they really do love that. And it kind of builds, again, that connection. And I think that if you have a specific post that's about why you love Cabbagetown, a reel or something like that, which shows you talking, then if you tag Cabbagetown, then hopefully they will also share that. So it also expands your network as well, which is always good.
Yeah, Cabbagetown. So we do have a social media lead, and she will be sharing out content as possible if you tag at Cabbagetown Art and Craft Show. So it's Cabbagetown Art and Craft, no S, show. And then also, again, like Kate said, if it's Cabbagetown content and things like that, ask for collaboration. We will try to do that as well. Our hashtag's Cabbagetown Art and Craft. So yeah, some other helpful, I think you've covered off most of this about storytelling on Instagram. And did we talk about hashtags? I know that you've gone back and forth with how many hashtags to use in posts. Does either of you want to comment about that?
Well, I think right now there's a lot of conversations about the algorithm, and the algorithm's changing, and it's hard to figure out how to beat that algorithm. I think that the older wisdom of like a whole bunch of hashtags seems to be kind of being reduced to hashtags that might be longer, that are more descriptive, like, you know, Cabbagetown art in the park, or showing my art at Cabbagetown. And it's working a little bit more like Google search, where it kind of pulls out those numbers, those relevant words. I think the other part too is it's good to mix it up, like have a carousel, have a feed, have a live post, have a reel. So really kind of mix up your content helps a lot. There seems to be some indication that longer reels now, between kind of, you know, 20-30 seconds, seem to be kind of trending well, versus the kind of like short 5 to 10 second ones. So I think you kind of have to mix it up and figure out what's working. It's consistency is important though.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think everything you're saying, Kate, totally makes sense. And you know, the algorithm is it's always changing. I think the most important thing from what you're saying is just make sure you post.
Yeah.
You know, use one hashtag, make sure you use the Cabbagetown Art and Craft hashtag. If you use 15, then, you know, it doesn't matter, as long as you're just getting out there posting. If you're not a whiz on the computer, it's going to reach your audience as long as you do a couple posts leading up to the show. So don't be intimidated by all the social media stuff. Just dive in and do it.
The reality is it moves around pretty quickly. So even if you have a horribly embarrassing post, honestly, those are usually the ones that get a lot of attention.
Exactly.
But it goes down your feed so quickly that it hardly matters. So it's better to just do something and do it kind of half-assed or weird than be afraid and make it perfect and never do it.
Exactly. I sort of tossed all the rules to the winds because I was getting kind of immobilized by it. And now I do a post a day, and it's easy. I don't let myself take more than 4 or 5 minutes. And because I got rid of all these rules, I'm posting. So just make sure you post, because people are paying attention, and they will come out if you're, you know, kind of local. So just make sure you're reaching your audience.
Yeah, I think that's really important what you're saying there. And I think if you're looking for content, I think don't be afraid to share and engage with other artists on Cabbagetown, and share their content on your stories, because that helps as well. So I would say engage as well, and watch your feed to answer people back, and to like have conversations happening. And I do agree with Lisa. I think it's more authentic. The story is more authentic. I think when it's not too perfect.
Yeah. Plus, being too perfect takes a lot of time. Like, there's a lot of other things we have to do with our time.
Totally.
Spending 2 hours doing an Instagram post is not part of that.
And yeah, promote each other. Like Angela said, you know, you might not be the best at Instagram, but there's over 150 artists. Promoting other artists in your stories is not only a great way to support each other, but it also really builds your audience too, because all of a sudden you're tapping into their demographics. So it's a really beautiful way to build your audience and also promote your fellow exhibitors. So make sure there's over 150 artists that you can work with and promote.
Share the love.
Share the love, absolutely.
Yeah, and don't forget Facebook. Cabbagetown also has a Facebook presence. So share the event and link the 2 accounts. Lisa had mentioned that as well, but I think it's important to link the accounts, because then the content flows on both.
Yeah, and I think, like Lisa said too, it's really important to understand where your demographics are and where your customers are. And obviously, a lot of people are using TikTok as well, and that's a younger audience. Facebook tends to be an older audience. So if you know that your classic customer is older, then don't ignore Facebook. I'm terrible at that, I have to admit. Since I got hacked, I haven't been that interested in Facebook, but I always know that I should be. So do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, and then just to let you guys know that by being participating in the show, any images that you've used for your submissions, and being, oh, sorry, someone's here. I'm just gonna let somebody in. Being a participant in the show, we will be taking video and film footage at the event, as well as photographs. And by just being in the show, you're giving us permission to use those images for future exhibitions and promotion. So if you have any questions around that, just reach out to us. So now we're going to talk a little bit more in your booth. I might skip through some of this and talk a little bit about the important things about having a positive presence in the booth. I don't know, in the chat, have people kind of raised their hands if they've exhibited a lot, like maybe they have their displays and everything kind of figured out about planning. So maybe should we jump ahead to like sparkling in your booth, or what's the feeling there, Kate? And I can't see the chat, so.
We're not seeing a lot of the chat. We have a number of people that have done Cabbagetown for the first time, but have done other shows. My sense would be to kind of maybe do this sparkling your booth, and then we can go back to some of the logistics of how to hang your tent and things like that, so if people aren't there.
Okay, all right. I'm just going to briefly mention the rentals again. So this is the rental form for those who need to do rentals, and it's due at the end of August. So you have quite a bit of time yet to get that. The AER actually sets everything up before Friday, so they're going to set it up before you arrive on Friday morning. It'll be set up on Thursday. So just wanted to ensure that you understood the timeline for that. Okay, so I'm just going to scoot through all of this then. These are just a lot of booth samples and talking about how to show up at the booth. So here we go. Tips on site. Does anybody, you or Lisa, want to like chat about some of this sort of stuff about once you're at the show, like some of the things that you have to plan for and prepare for?
Well, I think there's a couple things. So first of all is kind of planning ahead of time, and some of that is planning your booth and what you're going to say and getting materials. And then part of it is being on site. And, you know, I always sort of say that when you're on site, you have to kind of take off your artist hat and put on your sales hat. And I know people hate to talk about sales. I'm not saying you have to push and do sales, but it is a different mindset to be very engaged with everybody who's there and welcome people into your space, and really giving people the time and the space to look at the work, and be really engaged with them. I mean, people are coming out to these shows to meet the artist, and so it's important that the artists be present and engage in those conversations, which is not always a natural for artists who typically, whether or not you're a jeweler or a woodworker, they often work in isolation. So this is a chance to put your sparkly extroverted hat on.
Right. So Lisa, what's the most important thing for you in preparing for a show?
Well, I'd say most important thing to remember is it takes so much longer than you think to even get to the show. I am classic for, you know, it's 8 o'clock the night before. And I think, I'm just going to throw everything in the car, but, you know, wiring your paintings, photographing them, signing them, titling them, labeling them. So all that pre-work to get your stuff ready, whether you're a painter or a ceramic artist, that stuff takes way more time than you think. So give yourself lots of time leading up to the show. But I'd say most important thing in the booth, try to stay off your phone.
Yeah.
Right.
And try not to sit.
Yeah.
It's really tempting because it's a long days, but I think that it's, the reason that Angela keeps saying sparkle is it was one of the things that Shirley Temple's mother used to tell her before she went on stage. It's like, it's sparkle time. And that's kind of what it is. Like your job is to be really sparkly, even if you're not naturally that way. And I know for introverts, that can be quite challenging. So I think one of the things that helps, and we did a conversation with this before, if you're introverted and you don't have that natural love of talking to a whole bunch of strangers, it's important to kind of work through your elevator speech. What are you going to say? How are you going to say it? What are your kind of leading questions? And how do you kind of help people to ask the questions about the work you're doing and help them to decide to purchase your work? And I'm not saying that, that really, I don't think for a lot of this stuff, art and craft, that you can't really hard sell it. What you can do is you can give people kind of the permission kind of to consider buying it. And I think those kinds of conversations are important to have when you're there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sharing what's interesting about your work or about yourself, right?
Yeah,
totally. And in terms of like, if you are sort of a introvert and the thought of sparkling just, is terrifying for you, I'd say, if not sparkle, then at least this. Don't, if you're able, sit on a stool if you need to sit, because a lot of people can't stand the whole weekend, but sit higher up and try to look people in the eye when they come in so they know that you're there and you're available and you're engaged. I was getting not groceries, I was at Home Sense today with my niece, and like 3 people asked me for help in the store. And I thought, oh, it's because I'm doing my art show thing. I'm available. I'm looking people in the eye so they think I work here. So it's amazing how it helps to be at eye level, even if you're sitting in a stool. If you're at eye level and you're making eye contact, that's an open door to communication and communicating about your work. Even better if you can chat a little bit, even better if you can sparkle, but at a bare minimum, you know, being at eye level, making eye contact, making yourself available is so important.
And I'd say sparkle at something that's authentic to you. Like, I mean, I think that, you know, you're not going to do, calisthenics and, if you're not proposed that way. But I think what is important is having your story set out.
Yeah.
And, as a lot of artists are inspired by nature, by organic shapes, and you just want to make sure that you're not the 18th person that person's heard from. Like, you need to craft your story so it's unique to you and it pulls people in. And I think that you need to then understand and start to read people a little bit in terms of like how much conversation do they want. Some people it's good to just greet them and give them their space. Other people want to have a long conversation. Other people want to understand your inspiration or your process.
Right.
So some of that comes with, I think, experience, but some of it is just by really being an engaged and active listener, and really watch the body language. And again, like Lisa said, engage and be present is probably the best thing you can do. Even if you don't sell, you'll make those connections, people will remember you, and those sales will happen down the road.
Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
I'd say that I felt pretty extroverted pre-pandemic, and then I became pretty introverted in the pandemic. I think a lot of us did. And so I have had to adapt a little bit at shows, and I found something that works really well is that I bring some props. So if you're a potter, consider bringing maybe a raw lump of clay, or if you're a photographer, consider bringing an old camera. For me, I bring my palettes, my oil palettes, and just having a little bit of the process in my booth gives people something to talk about. They don't necessarily know how to talk about a painting, but they can talk about this little prop that I have. And then we get a bit of a conversation going, and then all of a sudden there's a bond. And I guarantee you the folks who are buying at a show like this really want a connection to the artisan. They really want to know the story, and that prop sometimes gives them a way in.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other part about being positive is sometimes it's really hard if you are surrounded by people who are selling, you're not selling, you start to have the second guessing, maybe my work is not good enough, maybe it's too expensive, maybe whatever, right? And you need to try and get rid of all those thoughts and just kind of stay super positive. There's nothing worse than people walking by your booth kind of going, oh, like bad juju vibes there. But also even doing a show, it's hard to be beside somebody who is negative and complaining that things aren't going the way they're supposed to go. You got to fake it until you make it, or until you can go home and have a glass of wine. But people really do pick up on those vibes. So it is important to stay positive, even if you're not selling well.
Totally.
Because it can happen.
So how do you manage, like, and we know that we're all different and we'll be different in the booths. How do you manage the fact that your customers and your visitors are different? There's going to be visitors who want to talk a lot and visitors who don't. Like, is there a time when you actually stop in your story just to see if they're actually going to have conversation back? Or like, how do you know when people want you to be quiet and when people don't want you to be quiet?
Well, Kate nailed it. You've got to observe folks. Kate said something just a couple minutes ago about reading body language and sort of paying attention to what people are putting out there. And you can generally tell if someone wants to chat. I've scared my fair share of visitors out of my booth by saying hello. So, you do get a sense of whether or not folks just need some space to look around, and you're just there if they want, just make sure you're not buried in your phone and you have no idea if someone's trying to talk to you.
Yeah, I agree. And I think as an extrovert too, you can be really careful about knowing when to shut up, because you also talk people's ear off. And all of a sudden I realized, oh, we're having this awesome conversation about, I don't know, tree growth in the US, or that has nothing to do with my art and has nothing to do with my show. So I think part of it too is just, again, it's not about you, it's about helping the person that comes into your tent make that connection with you or with your art, to the point that they just really feel like they need to have it around them. And so it's just I think being engaged, being an engaged listener and watching that body language. For me too, you tend to kind of know if someone's wearing, a bright pink shirt and orange hat and purple pants. Well, they're probably pretty extroverted, they're probably pretty chatty. And so you can kind of, get some cues that way as well.
Yeah, I think for me, I have a really short statement that I might say to somebody, just to kind of, and then if they respond to that conversation or not, then I keep going or I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I don't tend to ask, let me know if you have any questions. I know a lot of people do that, but to me, it's too it's just too open-ended. People don't know how to respond to that. So I often say, welcome to my happy place.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if people respond to that or not, or I'll say something else, a little short statement that will just engage with people just to start.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that also helps it a lot. Like I usually say something like, my work is about capturing the joy that you feel when you're present in nature. And I'll say something like, are you feeling joyful? Like just almost like throw it out there.
Yeah,
and that does help that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, awesome. So some of the things that we'll get back to booth stuff if people have questions about that. But I know that some of the, there's a lot of conversations about having QR codes in your booth or print material or not. Do you guys have feelings on what you actually need to continue the conversation with your potential clients at the show, like when they leave your booth? Like what happens? Like what do you give somebody? Do you do QR codes? Do you do business cards? What are you actually taking to the show?
I have a pretty strong opinion on QR codes that is backed up by experimentation. I had a conversation with a couple of artists who kind of felt that the QR codes, conceptually, they're great because you can kind of you don't have to waste the paper. You don't have to print all this stuff. You can kind of direct people to their website or to sign up. But at the end of the day, it does not seem to be as effective as giving someone a piece of paper or a postcard that I'm sure I'm not the only one that someone has come back with a postcard they've had for 5 years on their fridge, thinking about your art, looking at your art, and now they're ready to buy. So this one particular artist, it's actually at Cabbagetown last year, we had a little bit of a contest to see, okay, let's see at the end of the day, are QR codes better than print material? And he came at the end, he goes, I'm going to be doing postcards next show.
Yeah.
Because people just weren't wanting to do that. Through a whole bunch of reasons with privacy, but also it's assuming too, yet one of the other things that you have to be careful about is not all of your buyers are you and they don't shop the same way you do, right? So, if I'm a young artist, the people that are affording my work might be in their 60s and they don't want to fool around with QR codes on their phones, right? So I think it's also really important, like we're saying with the listening, is understand where your clients are at or where your potential clients are at and provide the material that is the easiest as possible to get your information into their hands.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with Kate 100%. I mean, and just to slip in there, always the absolute best way is to get their email. In terms of QR codes, I agree with Kate. I'm still someone who likes to give out business cards and postcards because, like Kate said, I have had more people than I can even remember over the past 15 years say, I still have your card on my fridge. And they usually take out their phone and they show me a photograph of the business card that they collected 5 or 10 years ago that they've been staring at. And I think that's pretty invaluable. It also doesn't take much though to print up a QR code from your Instagram and just have it on the side of your tent, because that does capture usually a younger demographic who walk by your tent and they go click and then they become your friend on Instagram.
Yeah.
So I'd say a bit of a combination. I would never just solely have a QR code, but I would print one up from Instagram because that is so easy for the younger demographic to become a fan.
And a lot of people too are just in the chat are also saying they include a QR code on their postcards, which I think is kind of the best of both worlds.
Perfect. Yeah. Perfect. And then all you have to do is put one of your postcards up on your tent. That is a great idea that I'm going to steal.
I know there was one point that I had on one of these things is updating your portfolio. And this is my thing that I am the worst at, is a traditional portfolio really is my website, but it is so old. And I'm just saying that it is one of the things I've had so many clients, I have to say so many times, it's like, yeah, but none of this is on my website. Oh, I'll check out your website. Yeah. Well, it's really, really outdated. So I would just say, encourage you to do that. So
that's a do as I say and not as I do, right?
That's correct.
Totally.
The other thing I wanted to say quickly about print material, because I do use this and I have, I do postcards. I usually have 3 or 4 different designs of postcards, and I have a different collection on each postcard. And I actually use that as marketing to kind of see which collections people pick up, which colors people pick up. You can see the one that's on the slide there. There's like 4 different cards, and it's really interesting. Then you start to kind of realize, okay, this color is not as popular because people go through and they'll choose the ones they like. So that's the other thing that where postcards are print material is valuable in that kind of market research.
Yeah, I do the same actually. I have 2 different postcards, like large postcards with images on the front with different collections. Like one postcard's one way and the other postcard's like my ink stuff. And I find it's really interesting. It actually helps me address what the client is or your potential client's most interested in, but also it helps them remember you a little bit better. It's like, oh, well, maybe you want this card from this collection because it'll help. It seems what you're gravitating to. This will help you remember a little bit more about it. But
yeah.
So should we talk a little bit about pricing and managing sales on site? So how are you guys managing your pricing? It's a big question. Even before the show, I got a question from a exhibitor asking all about how to price their work and how should they price for the Toronto market. And that kind of threw me off when they said the Toronto market, like, don't you price the same for all your markets? But do you guys have some opinions on pricing work?
Yeah, I mean, I keep mine the same completely across the board. I've got galleries up north, my galleries in Toronto, I'm in Hamilton, my website, everything stays the same. Because my clients, you know, Toronto's an international city, so folks are coming from everywhere to Toronto for the weekend, especially for this show. It's a famous show. It would look pretty, I don't know what the word is. Unprofessional. Yeah, if you could buy something here at this price, but it was a different price here. So just as a rule of thumb, it's I think most artisans and artists keep their prices standard across all platforms.
Yeah. And I think it might be different with something like jewelry. Like if you have your high-end jewelry, every piece is going to be very unique. You could probably justify having different pricing for different pieces. If you have something that's more of a cash and carry type of jewelry piece, I think if you modify your price slightly, people probably aren't going to notice from one run locale to the next. But I do think that you have to be comfortable with the price you have, and you have to make sure that you're not undercutting your materials and the time that you're going to be there and all those other things. So I think it's important to charge a fair price for the fact that all of this work is handcrafted, and it isn't just the materials, it's the time and the creativity, it's the brain power that goes into this work. And, you know, presumably you're there to, you know, fund your retirement, fund your mortgage, or fund the next amount of material you're going to buy to create with, right?
So how do you plan for what you're going to sell in your booth? I know there's booth logistics, but like the work that you bring, I think it's important for people to bring like different size of work for like different price points. And I don't know how that works with all vendors, but for sure, I think as a painter, like you have your large pieces, your medium pieces, your small pieces. How do you guys plan for that? Like, do you base your booth on that? Or are you more like all the same price?
I 100% do. Because I think that what happens is that, you know, you have a show like this, it's been around for so many years. There's people that have been coming for every year. They've maybe seen me in other shows. They're now ready to buy a big $3,000 or $4,000 painting. I want to make sure I have something there for them. There's other people that have never seen me before. This is the first time and they like the work. So I want to provide something for them that's kind of a pretty quick cash and carry. They don't have to think about it. So those are small paintings. And then pieces in between that allow to kind of cater to every single budget. And I think what you want to try and do, and I'm just thinking about someone I know who does jewelry, for example, like her really expensive pieces are beautiful, but she also has these really funky earrings that are like $35. So they're an easy buy. But for me, it's kind of like, okay, I bought one pair that I really liked, and then I bought another pair for my sister. And I thought, you know, but I really actually want something nicer. And it's that kind of continuity of moving your client from small cash and carry pieces up to larger investment pieces that I think you want to do. And you want to make sure the booth, stuff you have in your booth will allow you to do that.
Right. And so then I guess just some logistical things that you have to think about with your pricing too is if you do commissions, if you're a photographer or printmaking, like what are the number in your series for your works and stuff like that. So I would just say, do your research to determine what makes sense for you as an artist or an artisan to just kind of figure out what your price point is, you know, maybe research the market, but then also just like practical things like knowing if you're collecting HST or not, making sure people understand if there's HST or not.
And I'd add to that to just plan ahead of time whether or not you're going to engage in, you know, giving people a discount if they want to. What's the word? It's not barter. If they want to try to strike a deal.
Haggle.
Yeah, if they want to haggle because it's an outdoor show.
Bargain,
I
bargain
have,
price.
sorry?
Well, negotiate a price, bargain price, that's.
Yeah, so that's something, Steve, that you would know this. You've got to know if you're going to do this beforehand or not. So for myself personally, I don't fool around with my prices. My prices are priced that way for a reason. I've done my research. I've been in the business for a long time, so I'm really confident about my pricing. It's very easy for me to say that I don't offer a discount. And that's just something you need to know ahead of time so that you can confidently give your answer yes or no. And if you are going to offer a discount, if they buy, for example, 3 pieces or something like that, then know what that is. Will it be 5%? You don't want to get caught up in the moment and go, oh yeah, 70% discount or something, so just make sure you've thought it through, figure out what you're comfortable with, and be confident.
And if somebody offers you something, say someone is buying 3 pieces and they're like, oh, can I have $1,000 off or $1,500 off or whatever? There's nothing wrong with kind of saying, I just need to think about that. And make sure they don't bully you inadvertently, but sometimes they do it intentionally, try and bully you into a price that you're not comfortable with, so I think that Lisa's right. I think it's really important to kind of think about, am I going to accept checks? Am I going to deliver the work after the fact? Am I going to offer a discount if they buy 5 little pieces or whatever? If I am, what's that going to be? Am I open to doing commissions? If I'm not, then how do I talk about that? If I am, what is my process for doing those? And practice. Practice saying those things in front of the mirror. So when someone asks you, then it'll come off the tongue more easily and more authentically, and you'll be more confident in your decision making.
Yeah.
All right. And then I think just a few more things in regards to payments, just like maybe prepare a cash flow. I think that some people are still paying cash, not as much maybe, but and then something to think about is your payment system. I think a lot of people use Square. It's awesome. But I would just say, just think about how you're going to be taking payments from visitors.
I think a lot of people too, I'm finding more and more people are doing e-transfer, which is awesome because it's much more cost effective for us. We don't have to accept all the costs that come with PayPal and Square. But I do think that kind of leads to the second part, which is, you really do need to make sure you have a good understanding of your inventory and what you sell and how you sell it. So for me, I do these little sales cards for each of my pieces. And on the back of it, I'll write, I sold this on Saturday. It was through Square. It was paid by tax, and the name of the person was Maureen or whatever. So I can go back afterwards and I can input all that stuff in my sales and my accounting spreadsheets.
Yeah, so really important for an artist to track your sales at an event.
Yeah, especially because some might be cash, some might be PayPal, some might be Square, some might be e-transfer, some might be a check. You can get a whole bunch of different payment types, which you think you're going to remember, and you just don't. Unless you write it down somewhere.
Ange, I just want to ask if there's anyone in the waiting room, because someone in the chat said they might get bumped off and wanted to be let back in.
Oh, I don't see anybody there now. So,
okay. And I've had a couple questions in the chat about how many visitors came through last year. I'm not sure of that number. I'm not sure if anyone.
I don't have that number either. I think the Cabbagetown team thinks about 20,000.
Okay.
Through the show, but that was just some number. I think because it's not a ticketed event, it's so open and people mitigate like through the park and they go to the Riverdale park. Oh, there's somebody. I think it's really, really hard to kind of get a good idea of how many people are in that show.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's also one of the reasons too, though, it's important to talk to as many people as possible to go through the show. Understanding that there's certain people that are going to not be at all interested in what you're selling, regardless of what it is and regardless of how awesome it is. Which means that, again, just coming back to that, really engaging with the people that come in. It's not really about having 10,000 or 20,000 people. It's having the right people there and engaging in those people who are interested in your work. You don't need 20,000 people. You need, I don't know, maybe a dozen good people.
I love Cabbagetown because it's one of those shows where a lot of neighborhood folks come out. They know the show. They're interested and engaged in art. And I just find it's one of the most, I always lose my voice by the end of it because folks want to chat so much. And that's so lovely because it means people are really, really engaged. It's also one of the rare shows where, sometimes I'm a painter. So, for painters, it's different than jewelers and other vendors. I've had, I think it was at my last Cabbagetown show where I didn't sell anything Friday or Saturday, but on Sunday I sold the largest painting in my booth. So it is one of those shows, though, even though there are some things that are very affordable and some things that are very expensive, there is a demographic of folks visiting who are there to spend money. And
Yeah.
that's really, really encouraging, because not all shows in parks are like that. So
Yeah.
don't
I
be
think
afraid
it's
to stand
encouraging
up.
too, Lisa, I think that's encouraging too for people. If you're not selling a lot the first day, it doesn't mean your second or your third day is not going to be even stronger, right?
No,
it's not-
because it is neighborhood folks, they go home, they measure, they think about it, and then they come back. So it's really good for that.
Yeah, last year, I think both of my big pieces that sold, they were people who visited and then came back. So
Mhm.
I do think that definitely happens at shows like this. They know that it's a 3-day show.
Yeah.
If they're not too far, they definitely can do come back. And also, I think there's post-event after show important sales that can happen as well.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
I just want to encourage people. That's the slide that we're on right now, is like promoting after the show and following up after the show. Do you guys have any strong recommendations on anything there?
Strongly recommend following up. Like, so one of the things that I will try and do within the week is do a newsletter that goes out to all the people that join my MailChimp or whatever at the show. Thank them for being there. Reiterate there's pieces there if they like. Reach out to me. Anybody who was potentially interested in a commission or follow up, I actually mark that in the guest book and I follow up with them until they say no. I mean, people are busy, so they need more than one email, and I think that's really important to kind of understand that you can't just send one email and if they don't get back to you, assume they're not interested. You kind of, again, have to put yourself in their shoes and understand they might be super busy dealing with a lot of other things. So definitely follow up, especially, you know, sometimes you can tell if you have a good conversation with someone that the timing isn't quite right, but they're definitely interested. So don't let that slip away.
Yeah, so I just say post-event, it's also important to kind of evaluate how the show went for you, what went well, what didn't go well, because part of the goal for me participating in some of these shows is to learn about my work and how people respond to it, but also about what I'm doing well and what I'm not doing well, where I can improve for the next show, right? So I think that sales and showing up at these outdoor shows, it's like an ongoing communication with people. I have people who've come to almost every outdoor show and come by my booth and say hi, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's an ongoing conversation and relationship.
Yeah, and to your point too, Angela, I've also had people that come to every show and they're super excited and they have a long conversation and they don't actually buy. And I think what happens there is that they really like the work a lot, but there isn't quite a piece that's really talked to them. And often what'll happen is I'll see these people come, you know, this happened actually, I think it was last year at Cabbagetown, and I could see her coming from about 20 feet away and she beelined and she goes like, that's the one. Like, she'd been in my booth tons of times, but that was the piece that talked to her. And so, you know, I think that that's kind of part of it. I always assess, people ask me how good was the show, and I'm like, I'll let you know in 6 months, because
Right.
there is always follow-up. There are commissions that happen, and I try and tag those commissions and that follow-up to the show. So I have a good sense of what the value of that show was from a financial point of view. And then also, was it fun? Was it easy to do? Were the people good? You know, was it something I look forward to doing as opposed to it being a real chore? And I think those are all part of the pieces that go into, you know, whether or not a show is successful.
Yeah, and the Cabbagetown is looking for feedback as well. So we will have a post-event survey. So we want to hear about your experience at the show so that we actually improve and get better as well. I think at this point, I could either
There was
scoop
just
back.
one more question. There was just one more question I just want to address, because it was like, what's the best way to grow your email list? And I actually do a draw where it was basically put your name in. I invite people to add their name to my email list, and they can win a little treasure at the end of, like I usually do, like I'll do all the September shows at once. And that's a great way of encouraging people to sign up to your newsletter, knowing you're going to lose some of those people because they are only interested in winning. But it ends up being a great way to build your newsletter. You typically don't lose as many as you would think.
Yeah, I do the exact same thing at the show. I do it every single show. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lisa, what do you do?
I also do that. Honestly, I don't have a ton of luck just asking people to write down their email. There's got to be some sort of incentive. So having some sort of a draw, it doesn't have to be a draw for every show. It can be a summer draw if you're doing a bunch of shows.
Yeah.
But that some sort of incentive for an email seems to work the best. I just wanted to give one more tip about post-show follow-up, Ange.
Right.
Newsletter's ideal. please do a newsletter. I'm bad at that. So I think a thing that works really well, I've had some success, an Instagram and Facebook post of your booth with a great big thank you and a reminder that you can still get in touch, because I've had people see that thank you photo and say, is that painting on the back of your booth still available? So that visual reminder of your booth a couple days later is just a really nice cue in case someone wanted something but didn't get it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's good.
Great idea.
Good idea. Okay, I'm gonna scoot back. If there's no questions, I'm gonna scoot back to all the slides that I skipped through. So if people want that, or if people want to raise their hands and ask questions. So it'll be more about like recommendations for your booth and setting up. And if you're looking for a booth, maybe where to purchase one, things like preparing and planning for the show ahead of time. So I'm just going to scoot all the way back. So if there's questions coming up, let me know.
We've been addressing quite a few of them in the chat as well.
Okay. I think we're here. Facebook. Oh, no, in your booth. I think we're past the marketing, right? In your booth.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're here.
All right. So just a reminder, the rentals. So the two different rentals that you have, this is the tent. And then there's 6x10 freestanding grid fences available. There's probably a better image later on, but that's the fencing that if you ordered fence, that's what you would get. And they have tables and linen and all that stuff. I wouldn't recommend setting up a booth with all this. They were just kind of demonstrating all the things that they have in one booth. And those are the black plastic.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
That's a
it's a lot
crowded
for one
booth, I'd
booth.
say.
So this is more like, this is the things that are available. And then here's Nancy's booth. And these are the black grids that AER has. So the fencing is put up in the booth where, how you want it. If you're ordering the grids, they'll just be on the ground in your booth area, because obviously they're not going to know how you want them hung. It's your responsibility to have materials to hang those and to hang them up at the show so that they don't hang grids, because there's so many different ways to actually prepare and to lay out a booth, as you'll see with the next bunch of slides. One of the things that I think a lot of people do, Kate does this and I do this, and I think Lisa maybe has a different way, but plan your booth display ahead of time. Kate, do you want to just jump in here?
Yeah, this is actually really old. I can see these paintings are super old, but I do this in Excel where I have one square that equals one, like usually 6 inches within the booth. So I can be very accurate about what pieces are going to fit in the space, but also which colors go together. So sometimes I'll do this. I try and do this up to 6 weeks before the show. And by looking at what I've got and what I'm working on, I can then kind of say, oh, I have got like way too much blue. I need to add some other colors, or I'm missing these shapes. And this is where you can kind of see there's a whole bunch of different sizes that are kind of there. And I can make sure that they're all, they've got lots of different sizes to appeal to everybody, but I also try and make it pretty modular. My work is pretty energetic. And so I find if I also have a whole bunch of different sizes and nothing kind of fits together, it can be too much. So that's kind of, I'm looking for something that is going to be calm and communicates what I'm trying to do and isn't distracting anything away from the work.
Yeah, so I think that's important, like with your work and somebody else who maybe has another reference point. I would say the similar things, like you can see that Kate keeps similar lines and like it's really busy. So the lines are similar. And even in a booth that has like 3-dimensional objects and things like that, you have to think about someone steps back. What's the overall impression of your booth? Like, what do you see first? And I think that's why in my booth, I'll have my big piece at the back. Like I'll have something that anchors the booth, some large piece or something from a color perspective that it draws you in initially. Like we're all creative people and we know how our eyes move creatively around a space, a painting or an object or whatever. I think that people do that in your booth as well. So you want to make it attractive to people. Lisa, what do you do for planning your booth?
I'm so old school, which is my nice way of saying I'm not very technically or computer savvy. So I just do analog. I have my notebook and I grid it out just like that. And I draw it out. So, you know, exactly what's going on there, but I do it on my old fashioned graph paper. I used to wing it, and it is possible, but it's such a headache. It is such a headache to wing it. If you can just take a little bit of time beforehand to do something, either analog in a sketchbook or like what Kate's got there, you will save yourself such a headache when you get to the park. You'll know what to bring. You'll know where to put it. If you have folks helping you, you'll be able to kind of delegate. So I cannot recommend enough
Yeah,
Just-
I agree, especially this show because, you know, we're setting up on Friday morning, which means people are gonna be walking in the park even before the show is officially open. And that allows you to also just go a little bit on autopilot, like that painting goes there, this painting goes here. I can talk to somebody at the same time I'm hanging something
Totally.
versus having to really think about it and sit back. And it's just like, it just adds another level of stress that you can try and alleviate.
Totally, totally. And doing the graph paper, if you're not great on the computer, it does the exact same job. So
Yeah, it's the
it's
same
just-
thing, really.
yeah,
I'm just lazy because that way I can just use the same grid.
it's so much better. Kate, I gotta sit down with you and to show you today. But it's I can't recommend enough the idea that Kate gave too of keeping things a little bit consistent. And I'd say, you know, more isn't always more, less is sometimes more. So that overall look is really important, whether you're a jeweler or a potter or a painter.
Mhm.
Yeah, so just a few helpful things for your booth. I just want to point out, so your booths have to be weighted for this show. So please make sure you have sufficient weight in case of wind and take stuff in case it rains. So the show goes on regardless of the weather. And I think you need to be prepared. So plan for the worst and hope for the best. I think that's really the case for planning your booth in regards to like different elements that you might have. Make sure that people have a clear view from outside your tent and I guess easy access inside. I've seen things before where people, now again, it might change for some exhibitors, like you might have like something at the front and that's the best way for people to see your work because it's very small, like a jeweler. Or if you're doing food, obviously you don't want people coming and touching everything, so you would have something in front. But for a lot of exhibitors, you want people to have easy access to be able to see and explore the materials that you're selling. So I would just say make it easy for people so they can see stuff. And like Lisa said, there's a chair, like if you're going to have a chair, don't let it block your work or your entry. And Lisa, I think that was a really good point. You talked about having it like eye level, like a stool versus low chair. And then booth signage and names. I think I have a few slides later on. We can talk about that, some examples. And a guest book again to collect your names. I think we talked about how important it was to collect your names, but you want to make sure that you're doing that. And I think a lot of these things we've talked about, so I'm going to skip through. So here's just samples of different grids and different layouts. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. These are the black grids that you would get from AER Rentals. So I would just, the only thing I want to point out here is you might want to consider the weight of the art that you have. So if you have very heavy work and you're hanging your grids horizontally versus vertically, like in these photos, when you do them horizontally, all the weight is on your tent structure. So I would just be careful, depending on your tent, whether it's steel or aluminum or whatever, make sure that your system, even like the ties, can hold that weight. So the heavier your work is, you want to actually have it stabled. So in this case, Morgan's got his work, it's actually touching the ground, same as the other artist here. It's actually, those grids are actually touching the ground so it can hold more weight. Here's the fencing, just a better picture so you can actually see the fencing. This is the rental fencing that you would get. So that's an option if you're renting fencing from AER. White grids are awesome because they kind of disappear a little bit more. And here's just some different options of how to hang things. Some artists do these wood panels. So here we have an artist that's actually put it on the fence wall. And then other people, these are just hanging off their tent grid, these wood things. And it looks really nice, the white backgrounds. I don't know if anybody, and here's another sample. This artist brings in entire walls and paints them. Laura here has totally like wood walls that she brings in and hangs her ceramics on. Lisa, do you want to maybe talk about this a little bit? There's these mesh walls that you can buy from Flourish, but I think you made your own.
Yeah, so the Flourish walls on the left of your screen there are beautiful. And they kind of reinforce your booth. They're just a little tricky to get. They're from the States. They're quite expensive. Sometimes there's a backup in terms of ordering. If you can get them though, they're fantastic if you have 2D art. So I couldn't get them, but I was able to make something. So that's my setup on the right there. I was able to make something kind of similar. I just used a mesh fabric from Fabricland. So it's really lightweight. I roll it up to store it in my garage when I'm not using it. And I use just hook eyes, very similar to what you would use on the mesh. So I think my advice would be with your booth would be get creative, look on Pinterest, look on the internet, go to your fabric stores. You can get so creative with how you do this if you want to. There's a lot of creative ideas out there.
Yeah, so here's another sample of these wood slats. So the ones on the left is painted white, but basically they're these wood slats with these like angled cuts in them. And you can see Janet here has her art displayed on there. And here you can see a little bit better the white one here. So they've just done little etches and the painting hangs. So they're very light. It doesn't take up a lot of room in your vehicle, your storage unit, and people mix and match. So these are traditional chains. Yeah, you can do chains. That is hard sometimes to get your work sitting straight, but lots of people still use chains. And then here's some really different creative, if it helps display your brand or create an image that you're trying to do, just some different ideas. I'm going to go through here quickly. Here's fabric artist. Yeah. They use these like poles with I think chains or strings or whatever holding up. Both of these people are using poles to display textile art. So I think that's really a really great way to display. I bought these last year, those blankets. And here's like another wood display that people have used, wood walls. And then tabletop displays is another thing that people have to think about. So there's so many different opportunities and different options here. I think like you just recommended, there's so many different places you can kind of search and just look for ideas. Jewelers, even within jewelry itself, there's so many different ways to display your work and hang. So they're hanging these pieces because they're quite large. On grids, right? And but a lot of jewelers will use like these stands in front here. This is Michelle. This is her booth on the right hand. She's on the board, and these things are all like they hold all of her stuff. These wood things, the countertop that she's built all collapses and holds everything. It's really, really cool. Jewelers can have like beautiful glass tables with sharing stuff and small displays depending on how large your work is. But think about your signage and how large that is and what your overall impression of the booth is. You can see this jeweler here on the left actually hung these bubble kind of figurine pieces, but most of the jewelry is down on this tabletop display. Ceramics, the same thing. Think about how you're displaying. What's your overall impression and look. Ginny Kim has a great big sign here that creates great imagery. Maybe stagger it. These artists are all in Cabbagetown, so just some different ideas on how to bring your work or how to hide your mess. She's got like a curtain rod at the back there, and she hides her stuff in the back. So it's like, what's the overall impression? Are you doing any activation in your booth? Lisa, have you ever done that? You've painted in your booth before, haven't you, or no?
Yeah, I have, not at Cabbagetown, but I think folks love, like, it's kind of like when I said earlier, bring a prop, bring a chunk of clay, bring a palette, like, it's kind of like that. It just gives folks something to talk to you about and something to engage in. So if you can do a part of your craft there and you're interested in that, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. I think you just have to, it's sometimes I find it's a bit of a hard balance because you start to get into the zone of producing something, you kind of forget that you're not really there for that, right? And so I find for me, it's hard to get interrupted when I'm in the middle of something, but I think that if you have something small that you're working on, I agree, it brings people in, they like to see the process. It's magical for them.
Especially if you have a different medium or something that people might not understand, right? Like, I think that it does actually help them understand the work a bit better.
Yeah.
So here's some signage, Kate's, Lisa's, and mine. There we go. three different ways to display to have signage. But I don't know how many times I've gone by art shows and they don't have a sign in their booth. So I would just say exhibitors, you should really display who you are. The sign that you get from the show is very small. It's really just about a booth number so people can kind of follow along and know where they are on a map. But I would just, Kate, do you want to talk about yours just quickly?
Yeah, like, so I actually finally, after 14 years, had to replace my tent. And so I actually, I paid to have my name, like it's like vinyl press or whatever on my tent roof, so that it's there all the time. And so that was kind of nice because then I don't have to worry about bringing a sign. I did have a coroplast one that I had before that I hung in the body of the work, like yours. But the other thing about naming too is I find a lot of times people assume that because they've been around for a long time, people are going to recognize them and they're going to recognize the art. And it isn't always the case. And one of the other things I always do is with my price tags, I also put my name on the price tags. So when people take a photograph of the art and they take a photograph of the price tag, then again, you have your name everywhere where it's easy to find you again.
Well, I think someone has a question here. I just saw it pop up. But I
Nicolette,
can't-
looks like.
Lisa, do you want to talk about your
I'm-
package? Oh,
Can-
sorry, go
can you
ahead.
hear-
Go ahead.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, I just wondering, I'm gonna be doing the rental. Am I allowed to, like, I'm seeing the middle picture that is it just a safety pin, or how am I able to post my name on a rental?
So that's my own tent. So I did use safety pins, but with a rental, you wouldn't want to do that. You'd want to use some sort of a tape or something that's not going to mark the tent.
I know some people have used those really, really high, those really strong magnets. If
Yes.
you're
Earth
on the
magnets.
outside,
Do it.
so
Yeah.
they'll put two of those magnets together. I also know somebody who used bull clips, like, so nothing that's going to pierce it, I would say. That's something that you would want to reach out to AER with, because I think you would just want to make sure with the tent rental company, I would just be careful about that. I would say you want to use like clips.
I'd say, yeah, I take back the tape thing because sometimes it's so hot that would actually stain the tent. So clips or magnets is a great idea.
You
The
can
other thing
see-
is like what Angela has is she's got like a corrugated plastic sign that's grommeted. And so I can actually zip tie that right into the grid of the tent at the top, like so that it doesn't get in the way. It doesn't kind of create a sightline problem. But it can fit in any tent.
Yeah, so maybe that's not the best picture, but yeah, I have those, I have a grommeted Coroplast sign that I printed, I don't know, I think it was $70 or something like that. It's a good size. It's probably bigger than Lisa's sign. And then I just zip tie that to the structure inside the booth, so it's actually quite high. And you can easily see that sign, outside the booth.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oops. Sorry, oh shoot, I wanted to go back. I just want to say, also in this picture is 3 different kinds of little tables. So I know some people have like big, huge displays with tabletops. So I'm talking about somebody who is maybe has more open space within their booth. There's lots of different things you can do for tabletop. Kate has a very simple folded table. This in my booth is just a small table, and I've draped it so I could use storage underneath. And Lisa has a really cool table that she made. So I actually have a picture here. I don't know if anybody has any questions about it, but Lisa, do you want to briefly just mention what you've done here?
Yeah, for me, it's just always about storage and space. So it's just a box that clicks together. And I store everything in there. My lunch goes in there, my water, my sunscreen, everything gets hidden in there. And then at the end of the day, it just folds, it all comes apart and folds away. So yeah, hiding stuff, keeping it clean, and having a surface where people can write down their email for you. Those are the important things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like yours too, because it's a bit higher.
Yeah.
Bending down so much. So I really like that. Just very briefly about getting around. So one of the things pre-show prep that you have to think about as well is like, how do you get your stuff to the show? What's the easiest way? So I so this is my vehicle here, and I created this sort of like box in my vehicle. So it's actually, you can't see the tent there, but it actually is the exact height of my tent when it's all folded up in its case. So it slides under there, my walls slide under there, and then I have a little bit of room for like a ladder and like my tools and stuff. And then my art just all sits on top. And the reason I do that is because then often your art goes in my car first. And then so that I don't have, my work is in caustic, so it's easy to damage. So I don't like it like laying around, and I don't think anybody likes their work laying around, but I think with anything, it's easy. It's really works well for me because as I take my work down, I can actually put it in a vehicle or set it aside. And then when I put all my work in there, then I collapse my tent. And then I put my tent and my grids and everything in there. I don't know, Kate, you actually made something similar just recently.
I did, yeah, because I was finding that with the way I was working before is because the tents are heavy, they kind of have to be in the bottom, which means you have to put those in first. And when you're doing an outdoor show and the weather's always not great, then it's nice to be able to kind of put the work in the car before having to do the tent. So yeah, and I just made it out of scrap wood. Yours is much nicer than mine. Mine's pretty basic, but it definitely does.
I got the idea from, I think it was Sherry Hart. She had one, her box to hold her art in her car up like that, but actually became her standing unit table inside her booth. It was awesome. Anyway,
yeah,
that's where it came from.
The other thing is we did also have a question earlier about whether or not you can rent dollies, and there's no dolly rental for this show. But like Angela Scott there's a whole bunch of other things you should be kind of prepared with either carts or,
Yeah,
you
so
know,
this is a cart
wagons
that
or-
I bought from Uline. It's awesome. Kate, you have the same
Yeah.
one, right? It's a
Yeah.
basically Rubbermaid laundry cart, but
Yeah.
it really can hold quite a bit of work. It does have small wheels, so depending on weather, sometimes that's a challenge, but there are a lot of pathways at this show, so it actually works really well for Cabbagetown. And then I always take a small step stool. I don't know, depending on your height, I think it's a good thing in your booth to be able to take things on and off your walls a lot easier.
I
Yeah.
use a wagon from Costco. It's like a kid's wagon. It folds up. And it is a lifesaver. I used to use a
Yeah.
dolly and I find the wagon is so much easier.
I have one of each, and I use it depending on the show. So where
Yeah.
you've got a lot of concrete, I love the laundry cart because it's also great. Well, it folds almost pretty much flat, so it takes up less space in the car. But it's also nice because you can kind of store stuff behind your tent afterwards. But in some of the outdoor shows, we've got lots of bumpy grass. The big wheels of the wagon are kind of better, so it's good to
Yeah.
have on.
Yeah, I think it depends on the show, like you're saying, but Cabbagetown does have these paths, which does make, like you
Yeah.
can, if your tent bag has wheels on it, it's pretty easy to get your tent into the space and things like that. But definitely a cart or a dolly is very helpful. I think dollies just take up a lot of room in your vehicle. But again, if you have a big vehicle, a big van, there you go. It's not so much a question, but mine's always like space.
That's
Yeah,
what I
me
should
too.
say. I drive a Honda Fit and I'm able to fit my entire booth, tent, weights, wagon, and my artwork all in one. So that's
Yeah,
why
it's
I'm
pretty
so
amazing.
about space.
Yeah, so since you mentioned weights, let's talk about weights. So yes, you can rent weights. If you're not renting a tent, you can still rent weights. You can rent a package of 4. Lisa's made these weights and I've made similar weights. They work really, really well. Lisa, do you want to just tell us a little bit about that, what you use?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about renting the weights. Until this year, so for 15 years, I've always just rented weights. I have my own tent. And the nice thing about that is that you're not lugging your 40 pounds of weights around. They're just at your site. So if you can afford it, do yourself a favor, rent the weights. You don't have to move them. I actually made these for a different show down in Oakville where my tent almost blew away. And I actually love using them. So I bring them to all my shows now. And it's just I think it's 8-inch PVC pipe. I put some duct tape on the bottom and filled them with concrete, the Quikrete that you buy at Home Depot. They were the easiest things in the world to make. And they're pretty heavy. They're about 25 pounds each.
Yeah, so I have the same, and I would just say I put big hooks on the top of mine so I can hold it with my hand instead of my fingers because that kind of hurts my fingers a lot with the weight. So if you are making your weights, I would just suggest something like that because it's way easier to move them around because they are pretty heavy.
You can
Yeah.
kind of see on the side of mine, I have big handles. I just put handles right in them.
Oh yeah, that's right. You have good
And,
handles
and
on the
it's,
side.
yeah, it's
And
very,
I just bought some from I think it was from Amazon. You can actually fill them up with I put play sound because it's really heavy in different Ziploc bags, and you can kind of, and those actually they wrap around the legs. So
yeah,
but I also rent my weights just because it's a pain in the ass.
yeah.
I'd rather just spend the money to have my weights there and I don't have to worry about them.
All right. So, and then zip ties, think about zip ties, D-ring, like little hooks and everything like that you need for to participate in your show. But they actually have reusable zip ties, so they're awesome.
And they work. I've been using my same pack for about 3 years now.
Yeah. One of the ways if you do have 2-dimensional work is that's easier for hanging instead of always fussing with the wire behind your piece and to also have it hang flatter against the wall is to use D-rings at the top. So this is a bit fuzzy, but anyway, you can also, what I do, and Kate, I think you're the one who gave me that idea and recommended that to me, is just to put these D-rings on the top of your work, even though that's not how you're going to hang your work. You pull them off later on, but it definitely is like a quick setup.
Yeah. And I always make sure that they hang above the top of the frame. Again, people kind of say, oh, like it makes it look ugly, but honestly, nobody notices. And you have to remember too, you're in a park, like there's grass, there's cows behind you, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. No one's going to notice that your D-rings are hanging up, like,
Honestly, Kate, I resisted that. I resisted that for like 10 years. I did it last year. It saved my setup. I'm gonna
I know.
by like 45 minutes or an hour. It is so easy with the D-rings like that. Just do it.
Yeah.
It's so easy.
So another thing to think of is how you display your pricing and your tags or like information and everything. So there's so many different ways. And again, Pinterest, looking at all the different shows, visiting shows and seeing what artists are doing, pay attention to some of that detail. There's some other shows before our show. So I would say go visit them and look at how people are displaying their information in their booth. But it can be as simple as using like a name tag to like a curtain hook to S hook or more.
Yeah.
If you're looking to buy a tent, this is a great company. We can't really recommend one company over another, but I know there's a lot of people who have purchased canopies. I bought my canopy bag from them. They're even just sold a new bag.
They're also just up in Vaughan, and they can actually piecemeal. So you can kind of choose if you want. You can custom build your own tent. So you can choose. Do you want steel or aluminum? Do you want this kind of shape? Do you want that shape? Do you want what kind of bag? What kind of level of walls do you want? Which is kind of handy.
We always recommend a white tent. It seems to showcase everybody's work better. Prepare for rain. Boots and pool noodles, if you can get them, or hula hoops work in the corner of your booth as well. That helps just keep the roof taut and in your booth so that the water rolls away if there is calling for rain. So that's a good thing to keep it as well.
Yep. It's amazing how effective pool noodles are.
Yeah.
And I think we've covered all of this.
Yeah.
Oh, just want to point out other things to know about the show here. There are local B&Bs that are reasonably priced. I don't know if they're booked or not. But there's the area is well served by TTC, so I would say recommend people to do that. I think I mentioned that, but also there's retail stores and restaurants along Gerrard and Parliament. So for people if you need something ahead of time or after setup or whatever, but there is a home hardware store that's not too far away. On Parliament, and there's a Shoppers Drug Mart also on Parliament if you need things.
And again, I would really, really recommend to your clients if they're coming to take public transportation, like either an Uber or TTC. There have been definitely people I know that have decided to drive, and then they call me and said, "You know what? There's no parking. I'm so frustrated. I have to drive home again." So,
I've had that happen. I've had that happen too. And if you have clients or collectors who are able-bodied and like a bit of an adventure, I've started telling my collectors to park over on Broadview and then walk down and walk up through the farm and make a bit of an adventure out of it, because it saves the entire nightmare of even trying to get into Cabbagetown.
that's
A
nice.
lot of people don't want to come near Cabbagetown because they know the whole festival is going on. But if they can park on Broadview, have a coffee at the Broadview Cafe, and then walk over, and a lot of folks have done it and said it was quite nice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I think we've covered everything that was in the presentation. I don't know if anybody has specific questions or not, but we're sort of coming to the end. We went quite a bit over time, 50 minutes over time, but if you have questions, we're happy to chat.